Most people believe fat gain happens while they are eating. The moment a plate arrives, the mind quietly assumes a decision has already been made. If the portion is large, guilt appears. If the portion is small, relief appears. We imagine the body instantly turning food into belly fat as soon as it enters the stomach, as if the outcome is sealed before we even stand up from the table. But fat gain doesn't happen during meals. It happens after. This is where the misunderstanding begins. The body does not decide your waistline while you are chewing. It decides it later, during a period you almost never notice. For about 2 hours after a meal, your body enters a temporary state where it evaluates incoming energy. During this time, your bloodstream fills with nutrients, hormones rise, and your metabolism quietly asks a single question. Should this fuel be used immediately, or should it be stored for protection? This period is invisible. You feel finished eating, but your body is just beginning to decide what the meal meant. The stomach processes food, but hormones interpret it. Inside your body, glucose enters the blood and triggers insulin release. Insulin then carries instructions throughout the body. These instructions do not simply manage sugar levels. They determine whether fat cells stay closed or open. If insulin rises high and remains elevated, fat burning pauses. Your body assumes new fuel will continue arriving and preserves stored energy. If insulin rises and then falls in a controlled way, the body returns to using stored fat between meals. This means two people can eat the same lunch and have completely different outcomes. One returns to fat burning later in the afternoon. The other stays in storage mode for hours. The difference is not the meal itself. The difference is what happens in the 2 hours after it. We focus on calories because they are visible, but the real metabolic decision is hormonal and delayed. The meal starts the process, yet the post-meal window finishes it. The real story of belly fat is not written while you are eating. It is written in the hours after you stop. To understand why this window matters, you have to look at what the human body was built to handle. The metabolism you carry today was shaped in a world without kitchens, delivery meals, or predictable schedules. For most of human history, eating was uncertain. Some days, food appeared suddenly. Other times, nothing arrived for many hours. The body had to interpret each meal carefully because it did not know when the next one would come. So the body created a rhythm. There was a short period when food was available, and a much longer period when the body had to rely on what it already stored. Survival depended on switching correctly between these two phases. After eating, the body temporarily enters a protective state. Nutrients are entering the bloodstream, and the brain must evaluate whether this is a brief opportunity or the beginning of consistent abundance. The body does not immediately trust the meal. It watches what happens next. The 2 hours following a meal are the transition point. During this time, your blood glucose rises, insulin responds, and the brain observes stability. If energy levels look steady and predictable, the body relaxes and later begins using stored fuel. But if energy rises sharply and stays unstable, the body prepares for uncertainty and stores more. Belly fat exists because of this protective strategy. Fat stored around the organs can be accessed quickly if food disappears later. The body is not trying to create an unwanted appearance. It is trying to guarantee access to emergency energy. It is a survival decision, not a cosmetic one. Your metabolism, therefore, is not judging the meal alone. It is judging the pattern after the meal. If the signal suggests unpredictable energy, storage increases. If the signal suggests stability, release becomes possible later. This is why the post-meal period matters more than the meal itself. The body is waiting for confirmation that the feeding event has ended and that it is safe to transition back to using stored fuel. Until it receives that confirmation, it stays cautious. The 2-hour window is not simply digestion. It is a checkpoint where your body decides whether to protect fat or to use it later. The hormone that governs this checkpoint is insulin. Insulin is often blamed as if it were an enemy, but in reality, it is a messenger. Its main task is to move glucose out of the bloodstream and into cells, so blood sugar does not remain dangerously high. Without insulin, energy could not enter muscle, liver, or other tissues safely. But insulin carries a second instruction that most people never consider. When insulin is elevated, it tells fat cells to stay closed. Inside each fat cell is a mechanism responsible for releasing stored fatty acids into circulation. This release is what allows your body to burn fat between meals. The mechanism only activates when insulin levels drop below a certain point. During the 2-hour period after eating, glucose rises and insulin follows. This is normal. The critical question is how high insulin rises and how long it stays there. If insulin falls efficiently, the body exits feeding mode and returns to fat use. If insulin remains elevated for too long, fat burning remains suppressed. Certain habits quietly extend this insulin window. Eating dessert immediately after a meal pushes glucose higher. Drinking sweet beverages keeps insulin elevated. Grazing on small snacks during those 2 hours prevents insulin from falling. Sitting completely still after a large meal slows glucose clearance and prolongs the hormonal signal. The result is not immediate fat gain from one meal. The result is repeated unclosed windows. Each time insulin stays elevated longer than necessary, the body postpones the return to fat release. If this happens meal after meal, day after day, the feeding phase stretches and the between-meal fat-burning phase shrinks. Eventually, the body spends more time storing than releasing. Not because you overate at a single sitting, but because the hormonal story after eating never fully resolved. The door to fat cells remained locked longer than it needed to. Fat accumulation is not a single dramatic event. It is the outcome of many extended post-meal insulin periods that never quite closed. When this pattern repeats, your body begins sending signals you may not connect to metabolism at all. They feel like ordinary daily sensations, yet they are clues about what is happening inside the 2-hour window. After a meal, you might feel heavy or sleepy, as if your energy suddenly dropped. A short time later, you find yourself wanting something sweet even though you just ate. You may feel full and hungry at the same time. By evening, your appetite becomes stronger instead of weaker, and you start searching the kitchen without planning to. Some people notice their stomach looks flatter in the morning and noticeably larger at night. Others feel unusually warm after dinner or restless before bed. You may wake during the night or feel alert late in the evening even though you were tired earlier. These experiences are not random digestive quirks. They often appear when insulin remains elevated longer than necessary. While insulin stays high, your body cannot switch to using stored fat. As glucose begins to fall, the brain senses that usable energy in the bloodstream is dropping. Even though stored energy exists, it is still locked. So the brain asks you to eat again. This creates a confusing cycle. You do not overeat at meals, yet you snack repeatedly afterward. You believe your appetite is strong, but in reality, your body simply has not transitioned out of feeding mode. The meal has ended for you, but not for your metabolism. Many people think their metabolism is slow because they feel tired while carrying extra weight. But the issue is often not speed, it is timing. The body never fully returned to its between-meal phase where stored fat could supply steady energy. Once you see these signs together, the pattern becomes clear. Your body is not resisting change. It is waiting for the hormonal signal that the feeding period is truly finished. When the feeding period ends properly, a different internal process begins. As insulin falls low enough, the body transitions into the between-meal phase. During this phase, an enzyme inside fat cells activates and allows stored fatty acids to leave the cell and enter the bloodstream. Organs and muscles begin using this fuel steadily, and energy becomes stable rather than fluctuating. This transition is the real beginning of fat use. It does not occur during the meal. It occurs after the meal, once the hormonal signal quiets. If insulin remains elevated, the transition never happens. The body continues relying only on recently eaten glucose, and when that glucose declines, hunger returns because stored fuel is still inaccessible. Think of the 2-hour period as a switch. If the switch flips, your body begins drawing from reserves. If the switch never flips, the body remains in storage mode. Repeated meals with prolonged insulin keep the switch from ever-changing position. Over time, the hours available for fat release shrink smaller and smaller. This is why some people feel constantly dependent on food. They are not lacking stored energy. They are lacking the metabolic state that allows stored energy to be used. The belly becomes a reserve that is guarded rather than accessed. Belly fat accumulation, therefore, is not only about the size of the meal. It is about whether the body exits feeding mode afterward. The critical factor is not the plate itself, but the successful completion of the metabolic cycle. When the cycle finishes, the body shifts naturally into fuel usage. When it remains incomplete, storage continues quietly. Close the post-meal window properly, and the body moves into release. Leave it open repeatedly, and protection continues. The difference between these outcomes lies in how the 2-hour period resolves. A helpful change does not require extreme restriction or eliminating entire categories of food. Instead, it focuses on helping your body clearly finish the post-meal period so insulin can fall and the transition can occur. One simple action is gentle movement after eating. A short walk of about 10 minutes allows muscles to absorb some of the circulating glucose directly. Because muscles are using the incoming fuel, the body does not need to keep insulin elevated as long. Another small adjustment is patience with additional food. When desserts or snacks appear immediately after a meal, the insulin signal extends. Waiting roughly 90 minutes before adding more food gives your body time to process the first meal and allows the hormonal message to calm. You are not denying yourself food. You are allowing the metabolic story of the meal to conclude. Avoiding small bites during those 2 hours has a similar effect. Even a few tastes or sips can restart the signal and prolong the feeding phase. By giving the body a clear pause, you provide confirmation that the meal truly ended. The body then shifts naturally toward using stored energy. These are small behaviors, yet they change the meaning of a meal. Instead of a continuous stream of incoming fuel, the body experiences a defined beginning and a defined ending. When that ending is clear, insulin falls sooner, and the internal switch can change position. You are not forcing fat loss with effort. You are helping your body close the window it has been waiting to close. Once that happens consistently, the between-meal phase becomes longer, and stored fuel finally becomes available for use. If belly fat has stayed longer than you expected, it is natural to assume your body has slowed down or that something inside you no longer works correctly. Many people quietly carry the belief that their metabolism is permanently damaged. Yet your body has not been acting against you. It has been following a pattern it understands. When meals are followed by continuous signals of incoming fuel, the body remains cautious. It protects energy because it never receives a clear indication that the feeding event truly finished. Protection is its safest strategy. The fat around your abdomen is not stubbornness. It is a reserve maintained because your metabolism believed more fuel might not reliably appear later. When the 2-hour window closes normally and insulin falls, the message changes. The body senses stability. It no longer needs to guard its reserves so tightly. Between meals, it begins releasing stored fuel, and energy becomes steadier. Hunger softens because the bloodstream now has access to internal energy, not only incoming food. Gradually, the difference becomes visible. The waistline changes not because you fought your body, but because your body no longer needed to defend its storage. You did not simply eat less. You allowed your metabolism to complete its natural cycle. Fat gain did not happen just because you ate. It happened because the signal that the meal was over never fully arrived. When that signal returns, your body responds the way it was designed to respond. Fat loss, then, is not only about restriction. It is about finishing the metabolic story your meal began and giving your body confidence that it can safely use what it once saved.